We're sitting in a very sacred place. This is the place where Srila Prabhupada literally, figuratively, and as our lawyer Atmanivedana will attest to, legally started the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, incorporating it right here in this room in July of 1966. And so it's a very great privilege, blessing, and also responsibility to speak on Srila Prabhupada's behalf here. So we offer our obeisances and beg his blessings. Obeisances to you, O spiritual master, O servant of his spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. You are so kindly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya Dev and are delivering these Western countries which are filled with impersonalism and voidism. So this Bhagavad-gita, of course, is the words of the Supreme Lord, Krishna himself, and the Bhagavad-gita is thus ingeniously empowered by the Lord. It's described in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in relationship to the hearer of Bhagavad-gita, Arjuna, who experienced Krishna's departure from this planet back home to the Goloka Vrindavan, the spiritual world, and he was feeling very great separation. And he made one very profound remark, which is useful for all of us, that now I am remembering those instructions imparted to me in loving friendship on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Such words are potent, powerful to relieve the burning heart in all times and circumstances for everyone. And Prabhupada remarks to that statement by Arjuna in that purport, in that chapter, what is the chapter called? Not the Pandavas retired timely, one before. Anyway, that's something to research. That if one turns to the instructions of the Bhagavad-gita, it will help one even in a situation that might embarrass one at a critical hour. So the Bhagavad-gita is very, very potent. It's described in the Gita Mahatmya, which Prabhupada includes 7 nice verses at the end of the introduction, that just a little Ganges water and knowledge from Bhagavad-gita can save one and give one liberation from this material world. So we're hearing a very wonderful chapter. It's called The Yoga of the Supreme Person. This is Krishna revealing knowledge about himself. We were just hearing last week one of the, of course, every verse, but some verses stand out to be very important. Mamaim sho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana sastindriyani prakriti karni stani karshati. So Krishna is describing the identity, or how we can understand the position of everyone, what to speak of human beings, but all living entities in whatever species of life. And we're going to see in the verses 8 onward, Krishna is revealing to us how we can actually perceive the spiritual nature of every living entity. The living entities in this conditional world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So our position, we are a minute part and parcel, jiva amsa of the Supreme Lord. And an example given, which is easy to understand, a drop of water taken out of the greatest body of water, the ocean, analyzed chemically and qualitatively, is the same as the whole great ocean. But quantitatively, there's a very vast difference, practically speaking, no comparison. So Prabhupada makes the point that the different qualities of personality that the living entity possesses ultimately come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, of which independence is one. Of course, the independence of the Supreme Lord is unlimited, whereas the independence of the fragmental jiva is very, very minute. So that independence is the pivotal point of free will and ultimately loving relationships. Krishna never forces anyone, because if something is forced, how could it be love? Love has to be completely given freely without any motivation, simply to please the beloved. That is the definition of pure love. So, a little review of last week's purport. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are the Vishnu Tattva. Krishna expands himself, and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul, and by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. So this material world, it's described that simply that we have this material body is a symptom of our material conditioning, or that we have forgotten our real position of eternal liberty in service to the Supreme Lord. So human life is defined as coming to the realization that this conditional life is unwanted. This body is described as an upati, or an unwanted thing. If we're eternal, ever youthful, full of complete knowledge, which means no fearfulness. One time some sarcastic kind of ribald hippie was challenging Prabhupada, "Hey Swamiji, what is this love of Godhead all about, you know?" And Prabhupada looked at the young hippie very seriously and said, "This love of Godhead means that I have no fear." And that stymied and shut him up right in his spot, right in his tracks. So, Vaikuntha, no anxiety. Fearfulness comes from not knowing what's going to happen next, or to be in doubt. And ultimately, because people don't have information of what will happen to them in their next life, they are afraid of death. Even if they glibly say to your face that they're not afraid of death, they actually are. Only a pure devotee of the Lord is fearless, because, as we describe of the pure devotee, we offer our prayers, fearless, having taken full shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. So that's proper use of independence, and that placing ourselves at the disposal of the Supreme Lord is the greatest individuality, yields the greatest individuality, and it is the most perfect freedom and independence. In one place, Prabhupada describes the perfection of pure transcendental servitude as the most congenial form of intimacy, or as Lord Chaitanya describes in his Shishastakam, verse 2, giving us, or at the end of verse 1, gives us a full taste for the happiness, or amrit, eternal happiness, nectar, that we're always seeking. Karshati, grappling hard, is very significant. So, taking to Krishna consciousness is a gradual revelation of how our position in mistaking so-called freedom in the material world to choose between different types of temporary sense gratifications is not at all freedom at all, but actually a very heavy bondage or conditioning, as we just heard in the previous chapter, the modes of material nature. And information is given from one Mad Yadanini, Dina Yana Shruti, a Vedic scripture. When a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. So we have this material body, as is all objects in this material world is a reflection of the original substance or the spiritual body in the spiritual world. If we see a shadow in the street on a sunny day, we don't think, oh, this is a shadow. We immediately think of what is making this shadow, a car or a bus or a building or our body walking down the street, which is the source of the shadow. So this material world, it's not illusory or false, but it is temporary. The temporary shadow reflected from the original substance. So when he revives his spiritual body, he can see the Lord face to face, hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is. Prabhupada was interviewed by some very scrutinizing, experienced reporters from the Associated Press in his quarters at 55th Street in July of 1976, and the question was, can you hear and speak with God? And Prabhupada immediately said yes. And then one of Prabhupada's assisting and leading devotees, Rama Raya Prabhu, was there and thought that he would try to explain to the reporter, actually this means that for the pure devotee, Krishna is giving intelligence, and that intelligence coming from Krishna is Krishna giving. And Prabhupada just immediately cut that off and said, no, I'm directly in communion, hearing and talking back and forth. Face to face. So, we're going to read verse number 8. So I should just read, or do we want to do some here and chant the verse together? What's the procedure?
You can do that, maybe briefly.
Yeah?
Sure.
Okay. So this is the word-for-word translation. I'll say the word, and you repeat, and I'll give you the translation. Prabhupada instituted this because Sanskrit, being the language of the spiritual world, is very, very purifying. And by hearing the original Sanskrit and its translation, it helps us more deeply enter into the purport or understanding of the words of the Lord and the purport coming in cyclic succession. Sadiram, the body. Yat, as. Apnoti, gets. Yat, as. Cha, api, also. Utkramati, gives up. Ishvara, the Lord of the body. Grihitva, taking. Etani, all these. Samyati, goes away. Vayu, the air. Gandan, smells. Eva, like. Asayat, from their source. Sadidam yad avapnoti, yakchapi utkramasthishvara, grihitvatani samyati, vayur gandhani vasayat. Anyone want to take a turn chanting?
Shariram yadavapnoti, yadchap yutkram atishvaraha, grihit vaitani samyati, vayor gandan ivashayat.
Anybody else? So the translation, this is Krishna speaking. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So we will we can repeat this together. I'll say a little bit at a time. The living entity in the material world.
The living entity in the material world
Carries his different conceptions of life.
carries his different conceptions of life
From one body to another.
from one body to another,
As the air carries aromas.
as the air carries aromas.
Thus he takes one kind of body
Thus he takes one kind of body
and again quits it
and again quits it
to take another.
to take another.
This is Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here, the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or dog, he is sure to change to a cat or dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body, which carries the conception of the next body, develops another body in the next life. This process of transmigration from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karshati, or struggle for existence. So Krishna is saying, giving the example of air carrying aromas. Like if the air passes over uncollected garbage, then it's a very bad smell. Or if at rush hour you see all the train cars are packed, they're passing you by, first one, second one, third one, fourth one, and then almost amazingly the fifth or sixth car is practically empty. So let me go in there. And then lo and behold, when the car door opens, there's an unfortunate living entity in the human form, more or less living in his own excrement, and the smell is just so overwhelming. Or on a very hot summer day, the air conditioning in a particular car doesn't work and you can't be in there. It's the same air, or that air, if you're going in Macy's in the perfume department and the air is in there, then you have all of these different smells. Or best, if you are in a very natural place like a mountain meadow or near the ocean. Actually, it is very nice to live near the ocean because the sea breeze has so many vitamins and minerals in it. It's very, very healthy. So the air is one, but it's in accord with the conditions that make the air either pleasing or obnoxious. So Prabhupada is remarking that one has the choice where to steer oneself. Now, unfortunately, education, just like we go to get a driver's license, because that's a very responsible position to be in control of a machine that can kill people, it's so much power and it has to be handled very, very carefully. So education must be there, and one must pass the test, and then one is given a driving license, not a right, it's a privilege. So in the same way, having this human body is a life of responsibility, and responsibility is best exercised when one has complete knowledge and proper education as to how to utilize that responsibility. So, Prabhupada is mentioning, if one has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, dogs are known to be very, very lusty and very, very, let's say, cruel to their contemporaries. We have that saying, dog eat dog. We see, of course not here, dogs are pampered, but in more, what do we call it?
Japan.
I don't know Japan, but do they do that there?
Well,
Let's say India, that the dogs are very cruel to each other, and if they're very, very hungry and there's nothing to eat, then they'll eat they'll eat the weaker dog. We've seen that.
Yeah.
So human being is meant to be charitably disposed. He's meant not to be violent, angry, greedy. So if we keep ourselves situated in those qualities, then these are the qualities of a lower animal. It's not the qualities of a human being. Cats are very, very miserly, very, very, let's say, impersonal. For example, if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into a form of a demigod. So, demigod life, we see in many mainstream religions, their idea is to go to heaven. So heaven is a place where one can live, by human calculations, a fantastically long lifespan, thousands and thousands of years with unobstructed youth and bodily strength, and sensual delights are in profusion there. People are very cultured, and there's no fifth subway car opening with somebody. Everything is very delightful. Yet, they are very much competitive and very much conscious of name, fame, profit, adoration, and distinction. They believe in God, but they're not pure. They perform religious activities for the sake of having like more cleaned up and more elegant sense gratification. So if one is free from those things and one realizes those things are not really core of the heart happiness that one is actually seeking, then one becomes a pure devotee. And then one becomes qualified to experience the real happiness that the Lord exchanges with his Harivalabha, beloved devotees, in the most confidential, internal, Ladini Shakti, pleasure-giving potency of the Lord. And the place where that loving exchange is reciprocated is the Lord's personal planet, Krishna Loka. This painting here on the wall is a depiction of the sum total of the cosmic manifestation, the beautiful lotus flower there where Krishna is standing blowing on the flute with his beloved devotees, his Goloka Vrindavan, where the loving exchange is so great that even the image, certainly, of the pure devotees there, that Krishna is God, becomes not forgotten, but overlapped by the transcendental loving mellows or rasas, of which 5 are primary. Dasya, transcendental servitude; Sakya, friendship; Vatsalya, or parental love; and the topmost of them all, Madhurya, or conjugal love exchanged between lover and beloved. So the other yellow planets expanding out are Vaikuntha planets, where the Lord is worshipped in great awe and reverence. And there, those who practice very strict rules and regulations in accord with the revealed scriptures or shastras, they enter into those places. Certainly life is eternal, but it is not the topmost position. Then In the lower right is the Mahavishnu expanding myriads of material universes, the material where the laws of material nature are in effect, and everyone is, as described here, undergoing the process of repeated birth, death, disease, and old age, and there is creation, maintenance, and destruction or annihilation repeatedly, one after the other, after the other. We are not meant to be in a place where our bodies are destroyed, the world is destroyed, recreated, taking another form, forgetting the last life. These are all very much unwanted situations to be placed in. So Krishna consciousness is a process of reviving our eternal consciousness as a transcendental servant and lover of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Can I read more verses, or?
Yeah, you can. Sometimes we do that too.
Okay, because we see that Krishna has like a thought process here, and he's stating 2, 3, 3 more verses about this, and then in verse 12 he moves on to something more.
Okay.
So we'll see how far we go. This is verse number 9. Shrotram chakshu spashanam cha rasanam grahanam eva cha distayamanaschayam visayan upasevate. The living entity thus takes another gross body, that's material body, and obtains a certain type of ear, tongue, eye, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Purport. In other words, if the living entity adulterates his consciousness with the qualities of cats and dogs, in his next life he gets a cat or dog body and enjoys. So brazen is this material consciousness that another sarcastic ribald hippie stood up in Prabhupada's lecture in San Francisco and said, Swamiji, you've been saying that if you're not careful, you can become a cat or dog in your next life. But I just want to let you know that I don't mind becoming a cat or dog in my next life. And Prabhupada just said, you have my blessings. I was hearing the memoir of one of Prabhupada's early disciples, Hansadutta Prabhu, and he was in Montreal Temple at the time that John Lennon and Yoko Ono had that Bed In for Peace. Anybody who's older might remember that. And all we were saying is give peace a chance. And, all these different people were there, famous people at the time, the Smothers Brothers and Timothy Leary. And John Lennon invited the devotees to come, and the devotees are there chanting Hare Krishna. So Hansadutta had brought prasadam from the temple, made by his wonderful devotee wife, Himavati. And she was one of Prabhupada's cooks. And he was giving this to Timothy Leary, of course, is this big LSD guru, very famous. And he said, what's that? This is prasadam. If you take this prasadam, you'll be saved from becoming a dog in your next life. And Timothy Leary, he threw it on the floor and said, I want to become a dog in my next life. So, in one place it's described one should be very careful about associating with people like that. One should only associate with devotees and saintly persons. So you got that realization that Timothy Leary wasn't as cracked up as he was heralded to be. Gets the body of a cat or dog and enjoys. Consciousness is originally pure, like water or the air. But if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. Similarly, consciousness is pure, for the spirit soul is pure, but consciousness is changed according to the association of the material qualities. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. When, therefore, one is situated in Krishna consciousness, he is in pure life, or we could say natural life. But if his consciousness is adulterated by some type of material mentality, In the next life, he gets a corresponding body. So Krishna consciousness is a process of education, of knowing what is material mentality and what is spiritual mentality. Or to sum it up, or to state it simply, what is pleasing to Krishna, or Krishna. If one pleases Krishna, then one really pleases oneself. And one, if acts or thinks in a way that displeases Krishna, then one is displeasing oneself. One might think this is pleasure, it's pleasure to the mind, but to my real soul, I am either causing happiness or distress. So we should learn what is happiness and what is unhappiness. Or Shreyas and Preyas. Shreyas is ultimate happiness, and Preyas is immediate happiness, as you'll hear in the 18th chapter. That happiness, which seems like happiness in the beginning, but later leads to distress and degradation, is happiness in the mode of passion. Whereas that happiness, which in the beginning might seem hard, refraining from immediate gratification of the mind and senses, but ultimately leads to eternal happiness, that is real happiness in the highest mode of goodness. He does not necessarily get a human body again. He can get the body of a cat, dog, hog, demigod, or one of many other forms, for there are 8,400,000 species. Text 10. Uktkramatam stitam vapi, bunjanam va gunanvitam, vimudha nanupasyanti, pasyanti jnana chakshusha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Purport. The word jnana chakshusha is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body, nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body. So, why people are where they're at now, where they came from, one can understand. And we can see what they're doing now, what that will bring them to, or ultimately yield for them. So to understand this, Prabhupada says, this requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad-gita and similar literatures heard from a bona fide spiritual master or someone authorized by Krishna. In other words, the training happens by applying the process of sadhana bhakti, applying the principles of pure devotion in practice over time, that the awareness and knowledge and ultimately realization becomes deeper and more mature. And as Krishna says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. I, dwelling within their hearts out of compassion, destroy the darkness of ignorance with the shining lamp of knowledge. One who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He is living under certain circumstances, and he is joying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power to understand their change of body and their stay in a particular body. Lust, greed, and anger are so dangerous that they not only block our ability to understand what is real knowledge and real truth, but it creates an illusion of false happiness. Whereas a person who is situated in actual spiritual happiness sees the so-called happiness of lust and sensual desire, greed and anger as something very, very undesirable or dangerous. Just like someone would step out of the way of a speeding bus or, some danger. One would, oh, this is very nice, let me embrace this, plunging one. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati says the gross materialist accepts his certain death and destruction by accepting that which is apparently palatable to him. So, coming to spiritual life is a communion with the Lord within oneself, coming to the realization that these types of things do not bring real happiness, and this is not what I want, and this is not what my human form of life is all about. We all know that this human life is temporary. Even when we're very young, we know that we will have our appointment at the time of death. We have to give up this body. So this life is meant for artada, delivering values. So why am I living? Why am I going through everything that I have to do? What is the ultimate fruit or reward? One urge to get people to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. But in material life, it's completely the opposite. You have nothing to gain and everything to lose. This stark realization is very, very good to give you a very firm foundation for your lifelong practice in Krishna consciousness, which ultimately is what Krishna wants to see, to prove our ultimate sincerity or love. Material happiness, there's hardly any sincerity at all required, practically no commitment. If it feels good, do it. They lose all power to understand their change of body and their stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. And even more, they produce all of these ridiculous philosophies. Like there was some sign on a bar, and it said, "We're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time." Like for example, And anyone who stands up, they say, "Oh, you're just..." Folly to be wise where ignorance is bliss. Hardly one person in 1,000 realizes this, spoke the poet. They cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that the spirit is different from the body and is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. A person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. Even the so-called enjoyment of the materialist from the eyes of the transcendentalist is a suffering position. Practically even worse than what we would all universally say this person is suffering from distress or bodily ailment or poverty. That these are very clear. We can all say these are distressful situations. But someone with bodily beauty, fame, aristocracy, great wealth, and proud, spiritual life is the very last thing on their mind, they're actually in a much more suffering position. So, one established in knowledge makes no such distinction. He sees that everyone bereft of Krishna consciousness is poor. That is real poverty. Those highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to do what? Give knowledge to the people in general. That means to everyone. For their conditioned life is very troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer to the spiritual world. So we speak about the pure love of Krishna in his topmost abode, Goloka Vrindavan. But how to understand and practice that love without making the blunder of equating mundane material emotions to be equal or indicative of spiritual emotions, that process is to take part in very, very vigorous distribution of Krishna consciousness to people in general. That is how the pure lovers of God, that is what they do when they come to this world. Golokera Premadana Harinam Sankirtan, the treasure of divine love from Goloka Vrindavan has descended to this world in the form of the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And Srila Prabhupada, he recommended this distribution, teaching, or he used the word preaching. Of course, we have connotation of preaching from our experience here, and some maybe it's not so good, but Prabhupada used it in the good way, Preacher, I'm going to shove it down your throat, and, Bible in one hand, sword in the other, your choice. Anyway, preaching is the essence, and there is the statement of very great devotees. Vasudeva Datta, one of the great devotees of Lord Chaitanya, he wished to take all of the karmic or bad sinful reactions of all living entities upon himself so that they could all go back home, back to Godhead first. And this so much moved Lord Chaitanya that he very much approved this mood. And Prahlad Maharaj himself said that I do not wish to be liberated alone, leaving aside all of these poor, forgetful, conditioned souls. I know that without Krishna consciousness, one cannot be happy. Therefore, I wish to take them back home, back to God, and I'm simply concerned with love for them. Because otherwise, without taking part in this mission, it is very, very difficult to withstand the temptation and prompting of this prayas, temporary material enjoyment based on sensual gratification. But Krishna says, one who takes part vigorously in trying to help other people by distributing real knowledge, I give that devotee special protection, and he will never fall down because of that special protection. And Krishna affirms that this is the most pleasing activity, and this puts one in the position of being my dearmost, Priya Kritama. Our position is not to try to see Krishna or even to try to love Krishna, but placing ourselves in a position that Krishna will want to see us. And Krishna has so many wonderful, beloved, pure devotees who he gets great pleasure in seeing. Why would he want to see us in our conditioned position? But if we render service to the mission of his beloved devotees, and they become pleased, and they recommend us to Krishna, then Krishna will want to see us. And when Krishna sees us, then all of our desires are fulfilled. I'll read verse 11, which is the Lord's conclusion on this revelation and thought. And Srila Prabhupada in his purport very much focuses and exclusivizes who has a right to understand this. So we can understand what actual spiritual life is and what might pass as for spiritual life it's not. Yatanto yoginas chainam pasyanti atmani avishtatam yatanto pi akritatmano nainam pusyanti achetasa. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those whose minds are not developed, as we were saying, through this very sincere process of sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti and prema bhakti are the same devotional service. Sadhana bhakti is where the beautiful fruit or mango is not completely ripened. If I give you an unripe mango, you can't say it's not a mango. It's a mango, it just has to ripen. Or if I give you all the ingredients to cook, who cooked today's feast? Sasha. So if I gave you all the ingredients, does that make a feast? You have to cook it, and you have to prepare. So, those whose minds are not, those who haven't, we gave, the ingredients are there, this human form of life, Manusya Janmapaya, Radha Krishna Nabhajiya. I've achieved this very valuable human form of life, but I've not worshipped Radha and Krishna, thus I have knowingly drunk poison. So, yes, we give you this human form of life, you better get cooking. There's one funny story to illustrate how one should be very, very diligent in utilizing the value of this human form of life to take to real, sincere Krishna consciousness. One time Prabhupada was asked, how do you become sincere? You become sincere by being sincere. So, this is in maybe medieval times in India. There was a king. No, it was I don't know if it was Gopal Bhatt. Anyway, a king, and he had like a minister advisor, maybe like a jester. And it turned out a yogi would make wagers with people that he could stay submerged in a river up to his neck in the very cold winter, from sunset to the following sunrise. And he became famous for having to do it. So the king said, oh, I'll take that bet, And then he went there and saw that the yogi, and then he didn't stay there all night. And it was reported to him, yes. But then the king, he came back to the yogi and he said, you cheated. Because you see, about 500 yards away, in the temple on top, there's a burning flame, like a lamp burning. And you were meditating on that flame 500 yards away. And by your meditation, you'd stayed warm in the freezing river all night. So everybody thought that the king was like, welching and cheating on his promise, and so particularly his jester, he thought he's going to have to teach the king a lesson. So he was thinking how to do it. A week or two later, the palace cook got sick. So it fell to Gopal Bhatt, the jester, to cook the king's lunch meal. It's supposed to be ready at like noon, 12:30. Where's the meal? Just now cooking, my lord. Just now coming. You just have to be patient. Just now. 12:45. Where is it? Finally, 1 o'clock or 1:50. He bursts into the kitchen, and he sees it's like a 12-foot high ceiling. He sees a tripod, bamboo tripod, and the pot is all the way up on the top of the ceiling, and all the way 12 feet on the floor is a little sterno. And he goes, "What is this? I'm cooking. What kind of cooking is this?" So, well, you say that the yogi was staying warm, meditating on the flame. So in the same way, I'm cooking. So the king understood, and he went and paid the yogi his wager. The purport is that you don't want to just like take spiritual life as a little trinket or decoration, a little sprinkle on your overwhelming material activities. You got to really put the pot on the flame and cook it hard. You really got it. So, back to the those whose minds are not developed and who are situated and not situated in self cannot see what is taking place, although they may try to, although they might imagine that they're seeing things or that they're spiritual. This is the purport. There are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual self-realization, but one who is not situated in self-realization cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. The word yogina is significant in this connection. In the present day, there are many so-called yogis. And there are many so-called associations of yogis, but they are actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They are simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well built and healthy and or attractive. They have no other information. They are called yatanto pi akritamaha, even though they are endeavoring in a so-called yoga system. And we just heard, yogi nama pi sarva. Yoga means to come to the stage of full surrender in love to Krishna and developing one's siddha deha and siddha bhava, one's eternal spiritual body and eternal loving ecstasy and personality. That's yoga. And so the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the topmost yoga. And the distribution of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the topmost of the topmost yoga. They have no other information. Even though they are endeavoring in a so-called yoga system, they are not self-realized. Self-realization means Krishna consciousness, not anything else. Such people cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Krishna, in other words, the bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. Prabhupada one time said, only a devotee of Krishna can know that he's not there, that he or she is not the body. Identification with this body is for those who are not devotees of Krishna. It's like this illusory identification. I place a curtain of yoga maya so people unqualified cannot understand me. Just like we go home to our home, we engage in our nice activities as our real self behind a locked door so that the madness of New York City can't just come in. So Krishna's Goloka Vrindavan is like that. No madness, no insanity, no crazy as there's no chance of even a whisper of that coming. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Prabhu, I had one. I thought a lot about that, when you were talking about heaven. And so my understanding about, the heaven that Christ taught, and I won't go into others because all I know is like Christ and Prabhupada's words on it. But like for example, I heard a lecture Prabhupada was speaking. It was an audio tape, and a young woman said, "Is there a Christ Loka?" And Prabhupada said, "Yes, why not?" And I've thought about it a lot over the years, and my understanding, and I just want to get your input, is that, Christ always taught, it's eternal life he was giving his pure followers, and certainly he was a pure devotee, and I believe that if you follow Christ purely, you're going to have eternal life. So my understanding is either he does have a planet in Vaikuntha, or his planet is the topmost heavenly planet. I forget what it's called. Is that Brahma Loka? The planet that never gets destroyed in the end, it just goes up into Vaikuntha.
At the end of Lord Brahma's life, which is an astounding number of years.
Then it goes into, then it doesn't get destroyed, it goes into...
Trillion
years, something billion years, or three.
That's his life.
That's my strong belief, because, Jesus wouldn't tell his followers, yes, you have eternal life, and then, oops, I was not clear on that one.
What people do to adopt the words of a pure devotee over time is a completely different story. That is the unfortunate position. Things start off pure from their original source, and over time in this material world they become obscured, adulterated, compromised, mixed. So, according to the Vedic definition, heaven is a temporary place, whereas Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, is a place of eternality. And that's certainly where Jesus Christ, that's what his original words were teaching. Prabhupada accepted Jesus Christ as an acharya. Acharya means an authorized representative of the Lord. And Jesus himself said, I have so much to teach you, or I have so much that I could say, but you don't have the ears to hear. And he performed a very selfless and, we could say, thankless task of preaching in such a disturbed and violent place and time, and the result was that he was crucified. Prabhupada never liked the Christianity fixation on the crucifixion. This is their symbol. He said, if you love your spiritual master, why would you want to see him in his most painful, torturous, and just like most horrible position? Actually, Prabhupada was given a room in one place in very devout Roman Catholic Mexico City, and there was like a very gothic, graphic crucifix on the wall, maybe so big, the blood and everything, and the look of pain and anguish. And Prabhupada, he called in his servant pretty much immediately after being placed in the room, and he had like tears in his eyes, said, please remove this. So the teachings of a pure acharya are not different from the words of another pure acharya. The time, place, and circumstance of where they might have preached might be different, but the ultimate goal is the same. Prabhupada was asked by a reporter in San Francisco in 1974 that, like there's the Bible, the Koran, the Torah, and the Vedic scriptures. Don't you see there's so many contradictions in these scriptures? They're saying different things. I see no contradiction. If whatever religious process you wish to follow, that's fine. If it brings you to loving God and serving Him purely, then the goal is achieved. Just like we're here at 2nd Avenue. Somebody might have come from Long Island. Somebody might have come from the Lower East Side. Somebody might have come from New Jersey. Anybody come from New Jersey? Haribo. Somebody might have come from Upper Manhattan or the Bronx. If I'm from, if you're from Long Island and you're from New Jersey and you insist that Atmanivedana has to come from New Jersey to come here, and he gets to, you have to come from Long Island. It doesn't make any sense. I'll come on the Long Island Railroad and Long Island Expressway Transit or pay your $15 toll in the Lincoln Tunnel. The process is different, but the goal is here we are in 2nd Avenue. Is that good?
So you agree what I was saying?
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Christ is taking you to eternal life. But again, what these people who want to have their cake and eat it too have done, and
Sure.
that's a different story. But we don't want to talk about. We don't need to talk about that. Anything else? Yes.
So, Prabhu, even though the process of Bhakti Yoga, even though it seems like it's very simple, but even though the process seems like it's very simple and easy,
Mhm.
It sometimes feels, when it is executing, it feels like it's very difficult. What is the easier? Why it's very difficult to attain the love of God? Why it is taking so much time, and why it's very difficult?
Prabhupada says in one place that if devotional service is so easy, then why do all the learned scholars and scientists and big people, they can't take to the process? The simplicity is freedom from material desire. So we've been conditioned to accept happiness in terms of this body and mind or intellectual adjustment. There's no need of intellectual adjustment. It springs automatically from the Spirit for a very long time. Whereas Prabhupada said, there's a critique of, I believe it's Vishvamitra Muni. He was those who came to see Maharaj Parikshit. In the first canto. Anyway, he had a fall down from his renounced life. To be restless in association with wealth and women is not at all astonishing, because one has been associated with these things from a very remote time, practically since time immemorial, and it requires time to recover from the foreign atmosphere. So this Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya is so wonderful that in this one life, and especially in this Kali Yuga, when things are just so... In the Dwapara Yuga, you could live to be 1,000 years old. And in Kali Yuga, the age is 100 years. But who's living to 100 years? Satya Mataji, who was serving Radha Govinda, she posted that her grandfather left his body at the age of 95. So you don't see a man of such values anymore these days. Born in 1922, gave a little history of him and how he was a good person, moral person. So in this very short span of life, in the few years that we have, we can, as Prabhupada said in one place, cancel all accounts of our previous karma. So every day is very, very valuable. We shouldn't be, again, this prayas. I want immediate gratification. I want it right now, and I'm not patient. Utsahan nishtaya daryat tat tat karma pavartanat. 3 principles, was 6, but 3 are given at the beginning. Very important. Patience, confidence, and the first one, and nobody can be successful in anything without this, enthusiasm. One should have confidence, because I'm engaging in Krishna consciousness, I will certainly reach the supreme goal. The very last sentence of Prabhupada's purport in 1878, one will achieve the supreme award of Krishna. Right, when you get to the end of the Gita, how many times have you concluded the Gita in 7 years, back and forth? Or you do it twice a year? Or?
Well, it depends on which period of 7 years.
Okay. And when you get to that point, it's like, wow, how you roll? We concluded the Bhagavad-gita. So, the more we hear about persons who achieve perfection, actually the Bhagavatam has many how I came to and how I achieved perfection in Krishna consciousness stories. Narada Muni, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Queen Kunti, the Pandavas. What to speak of persons in, who had like maybe a little bump along the way, Maharaj Bharat, Jud Bharat, or King Chitraketu, Maharaj Indradyumna, who became Gajendra the elephant. So Krishna consciousness is always successful. The more we hear and chant, hearing and chanting is filled with all types of spiritual potencies. Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sharva Shaktis. And it's recommended, we were hearing in the 12th chapter, that if one takes part in the missionary activities of Krishna consciousness, one will definitely feel advancement in Krishna consciousness. Our Atmanivedana can certainly attest to that. We, and also Kaliya Krishna, I think at a time all 3 of us were together in Boston, a little bit.
1991.
1991. Seems just like yesterday.
That's a fact.
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah. Patience.
Is the example of the sparrow. Arjuna kind of asked the same question. It's very difficult to control the mind and senses. And the example of having unspeakable, undeviated determination. A sparrow, little sparrow, tweet, tweet. She laid her eggs on the ocean, and the ocean tide came in and took her eggs away. And she went and ordered the ocean, Samudra Dev, to give back the ocean. You gotta be kidding. A little bird, And what did the bird? I'm gonna empty the ocean, 1 beak of water at a time. Everybody laughed at this little bird for her impossible determination. Finally, news of her activity spread to Garuda, who was the giant eagle bird carrier, mount of Lord Vishnu himself, who's a very powerful devotee in his own right, And he came, and when the ocean saw that, such a big personality, then she returned the eggs. The ocean, she got her eggs back. So the purport is that Krishna consciousness might seem like a very difficult job, and then Prabhupada uses the English adage saying, but God helps those who help themselves. This is also the illusory energy, or that we should become like, it's too difficult. I'm standing alone doing this. Better to go with everybody else. Take it easy, If everybody else is doing it, it must be okay. Everybody's out, everybody's going to the bars and doing this, that. Yeah, there can't be anything wrong with it. All these science and Darwinian theory and just all the politics and I can go watch TV and all the movies with their computer generated image. It's fine. Be very careful. The numberless different conceptions and philosophies of life are all symptomatic of the conditioned soul's false pride. Trying to understand them, what to speak of take enjoyment on them, brings no actual benefit, but simply bewilders the mind and gives one a very bad headache. I will not speak other talk, I will not hear other talk, except for the words I wish to hear. All other words are useless. I will take the words of the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastras and make them one with my heart. I do not desire for any within my heart. Love for the instructions of the pure devotees brings one to the Uttam Gati, highest position. We simply have to practice and apply, and the result is sure to come. Hare Krishna. Okay? So we can stop?
Sure.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, who has brought this treasure of divine love. He has come and saved us all. I know in 1966, I was just 7 years old, living not too far from where you're living now, Syosset, that's in Oyster Bay. And the waves of Prabhupada's glory went 25, 30 miles out that way. And I remember even at such a young age, praying to God to give me an answer, because even at such a young age. So Prabhupada has come he was from New York City. He's came to our city, and he expanded the Krishna. He's come and saved us all. So we should read Prabhupada's books, develop a relationship with Prabhupada's books. There's a very wonderful program coming here every week and hearing Bhagavad-gita with devotees. One is sure to make sound, steady, and strong spiritual advancement and get the blessings of such a great personality as Srila Prabhupada, who said, I have purchased your ticket back home, back to Godhead. All you have to do is keep the ticket in hand and get on the vessel and stay on the vessel, and you will reach the goal. Srila Prabhupada is our good fortune. And Krishna likes that. He likes when we adhere to the instructions of the pure devotee. And even now, I've been a devotee for about 40 years. There's no end to how much I can hear about Prabhupada. And there's so many different types of things to hear about in the pantheon of Krishna consciousness. But hearing about Srila Prabhupada's life story and his coming here and expanding the Krishna consciousness movement is still my favorite. So I recommend that to everyone from my personal experience. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.